Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is parenthood. And the great thing about this episode is that you don't necessarily have to be a parent to listen and enjoy and get some game from this episode. Because here's the thing. Even if you don't have any kids, we all have parents. Now, whether or not they were your birth parents, or if you were adopted, or someone found you on a doorstep where the stork delivered you, we all have parents. And so the question I want to ask is, when you think about your parents, how different are you from your parents? And if you have children, how different are you as a parent than you were from your parents? And I think that's an interesting concept because, as the old saying goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'd like to think that my parenting style is definitely influenced by my parents because I think my parents are the greatest parents ever. But it was a different day and time for somebody growing up in 1972 as opposed to somebody growing up in 2025. And I'll get to that a little further along in the episode. But, one of the things that I think stands out about being a parent is, just your overall communication and the things that you do with your children and how you actually raise your children. Now, I will admit, parenting isn't easy. I say all the time, like, fatherhood is the most rewarding job that I have. It is the most difficult job that I have. And honestly, it's a job that I can't afford to fail at because I can't afford to fail my children. That is like the biggest fear of mine is failing my kids. Like, I've always put that on me to protect, provide, and love my children and, help them grow into being, productive citizens in this world, looking out for each other, looking out for their fellow man, looking out for their people. And it's interesting watching them grow. And, even as at the time of this recording, our oldest son is 25. It's just wild because like I remember being in the delivery room with him and it feels like it was just yesterday. Right. And so now he's already 25 years old and his name is Dion. And then we got Cameron, who's 22 at the time of this recording. And then our son, Brandon, who is 18 at the time of this recording, and our daughter, Skylar, who's 13. And so having 4 kids, like, you have to, what I've learned is you have to parent each child differently. You can't just kind of run roughshod over your children. At least what works for me is just being me, but also giving them me, but also understanding their personalities and everything like that. You may have one child that that doesn't respond unless you raise your voice or raise the belt. And then there are other children you may have that, if you say the wrong thing, I mean, like they're a bucket of tears. So it's just, you kind of got to know your personnel in that aspect. But one of the things I wanted to get into was like, the old saying, your parents would tell you, I'm not one of your little friends. And I think you have to be a parent before you can be your child's friend. The thing that parents have to understand too is that when you're a child, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, whomever is raising the child, is Superman or Superwoman. I mean, like, you see no faults in your parents, at least not early. Now, as the kids get older, they realize that, hey, these are human beings. These are flawed people. They make mistakes. They may make mistakes with you, but it's not their intent. And they really, really, most parents want the best for you. They want the best for their kids. They want to be able to provide and give in abundance to their children. But no, it's I don't, I never told my kids that, like, I'm not one of your little friends, but I did tell them one thing that my dad told me. He told me and my brother this. My brother's 3 years younger than me, and he told us this when we were kids. He said, there's gonna come a point in time where I'm not like your dad anymore. I'm like one of your best friends. And he's like, we're gonna be best friends later on in life. And that is truly the case right now, at the time of this recording. Because we talk and it's been like this for years, but we talk every other day. And he's truly like my best friend. And he's my biggest fan and always has been. And same with my mom. I mean, like, we talk all the time and we're very close, and there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my mom. And we're great friends, and she's someone that I seek even at 52 years old. I still seek counsel from my mom because she's been through and seen so much that even me, just scratching the surface, I don't. Here's the thing, my goal, and I always say this: if I can be half the parent that my parents were for me and my brother, I'd feel like I've succeeded in life as a parent. But the idea and the concept of being friends, the friendship part comes later. You have to parent your children first. When we were coming up, there was one thing that, I knew that my parents weren't going to do. You don't uphold a kid when they're wrong. I mean, like, if your child is at school and they are cutting up, as they say, at school, it's not your job as a parent to go to the school and raise hell. Because here's the thing, you know your child. You know your child better than anybody else. So if they call you and they say, hey, little Johnny's up here at the schoolhouse cutting up, you know your child. You know little Johnny's at the schoolhouse cutting up. So you got to go up there. And when you go up there, it's not your job to show out or flex your authority. Not really. It's really your job to find out why little Johnny's cutting up and then reprimand him, whether or not you reprimand him in front of the adults or what have you. But there has to be a position established to let little Johnny know, like, this isn't cool. This is not what we're doing. But yeah, my parents always said, it was like, we're never going to uphold you when you're wrong. We will fight for you, but we're never going to uphold you when you're wrong. And I remember it's funny how all this stuff comes back to me, but I remember distinctly my mom telling me at like 8 years old, she said, look, if you ever go to jail, don't call me. And I was like, what you mean? What do you mean don't call you? She was like, don't call us. Plain and simple. And I was like, well, what if something happens? She was like, you have no reason to go to jail. She was like, don't call me. I'm not coming to bail you out. Those were her words. And I didn't understand it, but the way she said it and what she meant by it was like, even something as crazy as, well, what if I'm in a car and we get pulled over and somebody got weed? She was like, well, you shouldn't be in a car with somebody with weed. That was her answer. So it's like, she had an answer for every scenario. Well, what if I'm with somebody and they shoot somebody? Well, you shouldn't be with friends. Your friends shouldn't be shooting people. Well, what if this happened? What if we're in a store and they accuse us of stealing and we didn't steal? Well, you shouldn't be in a store stealing. You shouldn't be in a position where you shouldn't be accused. And she was like, and this is 8, 9, 10 years old. So every scenario that I asked her, she was just like, no, you're never going to jail. Because if you ever go to jail, you don't need to call me. She was like, if they arrest you for drunken driving, you shouldn't have been drinking. So, and it sounded hard. And to this day, I don't know if she really would have let me sit in jail. She probably wouldn't have, but she just really established the idea that no, jail ain't someplace that you're ever going to be. And so I live my life in such to where I'm not going to jail. That was never like a thought for me. But that was the thing. We're not going to uphold you when you're wrong. And so it gave us and lent to an idea of being good young men, being good people, being kind, and all of those good things. And we were, well, I can't speak for my brother. I was mischievous. I got into stuff, but I mean, I would never get into trouble, like to the point where I'd have to go to the principal's office or any type of legal trouble or anything like that. But, one thing I learned as being a parent is that, you also want to share these stories with your kids because your kids think, that I'm not going to say my kids thought I was perfect, but, when I would tell them stories like, oh, Dad, you just, here you go with another story. But no, I was being honest. Like, this stuff happened. If you don't believe me, ask Grandma and Grandpa. But I think more often than not, the idea of being a parent and being there for your children and making sure that they make the right decisions, even when because there's going to be times when they don't make the right decision. But being a parent is a part of being there. I always say, like, one of the biggest decisions that I made was in Defiance, because my mom, after hearing this filthy rap album that I was playing called Easy Does It by Eazy-E, she reprimanded me and told me to throw that tape in the trash. And I never did. And I continued to listen to Eazy-E and NWA, and I fell in love with, that was part of me falling in love with hip hop. And maybe if I throw those tapes away, maybe I don't become the fan that I am in hip hop. But hip hop did a lot for me. And, so I forbade my mother, but, it worked out okay. But the lesson that it taught me was, even as a parent, we have to be careful about what we try to prevent or we tell our kids not to do. Now, I mean, my mom didn't, she told us not to do drugs, but you ain't had to tell me not to do drugs. What I look like doing dope. So it was never a thing. And, liquor, we had enough alcoholics in my family. So I didn't drink it. I didn't take my first drink until I was 26 years old. So, even now I'm a very, not even a social drink. I drink every blue moon. But I said all that to say this, like, so the ground rules were set, and then you kind of let your children move within those parameters, if you will. But it goes back to the idea of establishing what it is that you want them to do, and then giving them boundaries, but not forbidding them from doing something. Because here's the thing, especially when your kids get older, you can sit there and tell your kids not to have sex. You knew what you did when you was in high school. You knew what you did when you was in college. I mean, the only thing you could do is be there for them, tell them to make good decisions. And, but you can't just say, don't you get nobody pregnant. If you get somebody pregnant, you getting out of my house. Or if you get pregnant, you getting out of my house. I mean, come on, man. Now, I do know that that's happened to people, but there has to be a lesson that goes along with it. There has to be a teaching process that goes along with it. And that's a part of being a parent. But now the other side of it is, what makes a good parent, and what makes a parent a bad parent? Sit tight. We'll take a quick commercial break, and on the other side, I'll tell you just what it is. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle Podcast. We're talking about the parenthood. Before the break, I told you I'd come back and tell you about, what makes a good parent, and what makes a bad parent, a bad parent. First with the bad, I think one thing that makes a parent a bad parent is when you don't allow your children to be who they are. You learn early in life that your kids are going to grow to be whoever they're going to be. You may not like who they hang around with, and you can kind of control that to some degree. You may not like who they date. You may not like the color of the skin of the person that they chose to marry or their religious background. But at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. But, being a bad parent is stepping on all of that stuff, not allowing your kid to be who they are, not allowing them to be, if they're weird, let them be weird. If they are, aggressive, let them be aggressive, but try to harness that aggression. Maybe you put them in a sporting event or something like that. Allow your kids to be who they are. Another thing bad parents do is try to relive their lives through their kids again. I personally, I went through high school. I had a great run in high school. I had a great 4-year career in high school. I had a great elementary school. I had a not so good middle school years, and I mentioned that on the episodes. But I lived that part of my life. So as my kids are going, I have stories and I have anecdotes that I can share with them, but I can't relive that through them. I earlier this year I did an episode about my son Brandon, who's 18, and he's a high school senior, and he played football, and he chose to wear the number 12, and it was great. It was a great gesture. It wasn't something that I told him to do, but I also reminded him, like, look, you got to be you. I thought the idea of him wearing 12 was a great gesture to his old man, but I wanted him to be him, and I wanted him to enjoy, football, but go through it and not try to do what dad did, because you can't do what dad did. What dad did was 30 years ago. And there's no going back to being that. Be the best Brandon. That's all that I needed him to be. And I think, a lot of times parents will get in the way of their kids. And, when they get in the way of the kids being who they are, they end up being, very resentful. One way that you can be a good parent, I think, is to really just allow yourself to, as a parent, be open and transparent about who you are as a person. Because like I said earlier, parents are like superheroes, super mom, super dad. And they have faults, it's funny because, like, there have been times where I've told my kids stories about me or told stories about my wife, and they look in amazement like, oh, I can't believe that you did that. Like, I remember, and I've talked about it before, where I did something dumb where me and my buddy stole some road signs. And my kids were looking at me like, man, are you crazy? Like, you stole some road signs? And I mean, like, that wasn't the worst thing that I've done, but I mean, like, just to give them a gist of, like, yeah, your dad did something stupid. I mean, because I could have gotten pulled over, could have went to jail, and my mom wouldn't have came and got me. But just being transparent, because I think as they get older, they'll see that there's a lot of similarities between them and you. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes people's parents can be big assholes. And if you're that way, then the kids are going to grow up and say, hey, I don't want to be anything like my dad. I don't want to be anything like my mom. You show them what you want them to become, because you spend so much time with your children. It's only natural that they're going to want to, or that some of what you do is going to rub off on them, basically. And outside of being transparent, another way to be a good parent is to allow your kids to just grow. I think, I came up in an era where we didn't have the technology that we have today. So we spent a lot of time outside, because what was happening outside? Everything. The flip side of that is that we weren't sheltered, if you will. A lot of times my kids included, are very much sheltered because, like, a lot of stuff that they do is inside. And when they're attached to the cell phones and the whole nine. And that's cool. But at the end of the day, you want them to get out and explore. I tell my kids all the time, you got to see the world. You got to move around, but never move in fear, but be aware of your surroundings. You have to be like that. And I tell them all the time, like, as much as part of my job as a father is to protect them, I know that I can protect them inside these four walls. Once they get outside the house, I can't. But I have to give them the tools to where they can protect themselves. And another way of being a great parent, I think, is to, and somewhere I heard this somewhere a couple of years ago, is to prepare your children to live and succeed in a world without you. That's tough. That is like, it makes so much sense, but it's tough to analyze and deal with, because you want to be here for your kids. I don't want to ever not be with my kids. But the reality is that I'm not going to live forever. I have no plans of leaving. I plan to be here for a couple of 100 years. But God has a say in that, and He has the last say in that. So, I definitely don't want to outlive any of my kids. That's a parent's biggest nightmare. But it's my job to prepare them for a world without me, and to be able-bodied citizens who can live productive lives. I've been fortunate enough to have not lost my parents. At some point in time, that's going to happen, right? But I think they've given me enough to move on. I've seen people and have had friends and family members who really have not been able to move and put 2 feet in front of each other and continue to move forward without, that parent being there. And I get it, right? But at the end of the day, this is what we do. And some of our children will reproduce and we will become grandparents. I know people got friends who are already grandparents. And it's a beautiful thing. I don't know what that feels like. I haven't really even given it a lot of thought. It's something I can wait for. But I do know the love and how my parents changed once they became grandparents. So I think those are some things that where you kind of become a good parent. And last thing before we get out of here, another question I have for you. Did you talk about parenthood before you became a parent with the person that you became a parent with? I'm curious. And I don't say that, sarcastically, but I found that not a lot of people have discussions about who they are as parents or who they would be as parents and the type of life that they would want to leave as a parent. And that's scary, because anytime you lay down with somebody, you can become a parent, right? I think we all know that. At least I would think we do. And so I would think that you would have those type of discussions, because the worst thing that can happen is you become a parent with someone and you both have, you're on opposite sides of the fence as far as how you would want to deal with your kids. And, children aren't just from birth to 18. Children are for your entire lifetime. You will forever be a parent. Parenting goes into perpetuity, because here's the thing, even when you die at 105, you're still their parent, and history will remember you as their parent, and they will remember you as their parent. So there's no getting away from it, right? So I'm very interested to know it, and hit me up wherever you can respond on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, thank you for watching the comment section. But I'm curious about that. Did you talk to the person that you procreated with about parenting before you became a parent? Now, fortunate enough for me, Sharice and I went to college together. That's where we met, and that's where we dated for 4 years or so. And we lived together, so we got a chance we had plenty of conversations. And even in those conversations, I'll be honest, I don't know that we ever said we was going to have 4 kids. I knew we'd have a son. I knew that. I didn't know it'd be 4 of them. I mean, 4 kids, but it's just like any other parent. What I'm going to say is just what probably most parents will tell you. You know that you had a life before you became a parent, but like, since you become a parent, like life, everything changed, and it's such a beautiful thing. But yeah, if you're looking to become a parent, or if you don't have any kids, if you're with someone, I would think that would be a conversation that you should have early and often. What is your parenting style? What do you think about being a parent? How would you parent? How would you raise kids? Where would you want to raise kids? All of these questions. How would you discipline kids? Because my sons got spankings. They didn't get a lot. Well, according to them, they got a bunch of spankings, but I don't remember what they say. And it's so funny now to hear them as they're young adults talking about, oh yeah, I remember I got the spanking because I did such and such. I'm like, I don't remember that. But my daughter, she's gotten, I think Sharice has spanked her once or twice. I mean, she's really the least disciplined problem child. And we made a conscious decision, when she was born, even before she was born, that I was going to never spank her, because we never want her to get the idea that a man, even her father, hitting her would be okay. And then some people don't believe in spankings. I mean, and I get it. If I had to do it all over again, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have spanked. But they got the spankings that they deserve. But anyway, but yeah, in conclusion, I just wanted to get on here and talk about parenthood. I think it's a beautiful thing. Again, I feel fortunate. I feel blessed. I thank God every day for blessing me with these 4 people who have made Kyle a better person, a better man, a better father. Any and everything I do is for them. I tell them all the time, the house we live in, the cars we drive. No, I mean, all the stuff we have, clothes, all this material stuff. Listen, if it was just me, I mean, I'd be living in a cardboard box and I'd be chilling. But I do it for them, but I also want them to become, when the time is right, when, God sees fit, they will become parents at some point. I want them to know that, a lot of what they will become as far as parents, because here's the thing, what they're becoming as people are smaller versions of me and Sharice. And I'm okay with that. I really don't have a choice to be okay with that, because this is who they are. But they're truly a blessing, and all children are. And if you're a parent, be a good parent. Or at least try your best to be a good parent, because ultimately our kids are a reflection of us, and we're a reflection of them. And that's what really and truly matters. That's going to do it for me. This has been another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on every streaming platform to listen. New episodes drop every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. We're on social media at 12 Kyle, at 12 Kyle podcast, across the board on every social media platform. If you want to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. You can also buy merch. There's a link in the description box that says merch. Click that link. You can buy 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs. We got it for the low. And last but not least, we have a new baby. The new baby is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the intersection where we have discussions about hip hop, R&B, rap, and soul music from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Trust me, it is the best music podcast that you've never heard. So check it out. We drop new episodes every Monday at midnight. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.